Christmas Eve, 2018. The snow was falling gently outside our home in Spokane, Washington, and I was putting the finishing touches on Gregory's favorite apple pie. At 62, I thought I knew what life had in store for me. Quiet evenings with my husband of 38 years, watching our grandchildren grow up, maybe traveling to see the northern lights like we'd always dreamed. Gregory had stepped out to buy wine for Christmas dinner, kissing my forehead and promising he'd be back in 20 minutes. "Don't burn my pie, Martha," he'd joked, his brown eyes twinkling the way they had since we were teenagers. 20 minutes turned into 2 hours. 2 hours became 2 days. 2 days stretched into 5 agonizing years of police searches, private investigators that drained our $47,000 savings account, and sleepless nights wondering if the man I loved was lying dead in a ditch somewhere, or if he'd simply decided he was tired of our life together. My name is Martha Kennedy, and for 5 years I've been a widow without a funeral, a wife without a husband, living in a house that felt more like a tomb than a home. The police declared Gregory missing after finding his abandoned car near the Spokane River with his wallet and wedding ring on the dashboard. Detective Morrison told me most missing persons cases involving middle-aged men usually meant one of 2 things: suicide or a desperate escape from overwhelming debt. We had neither suicidal tendencies nor crushing financial problems, but hope is a dangerous thing when it's all you have left. I'd spent those 5 years reconstructing myself piece by piece. I sold Gregory's vintage motorcycle for $12,000 to cover the mortgage payments. I took a part-time job at the local library, earning $200 a month to supplement my small pension. I learned to sleep on his side of the bed because mine felt too empty. I celebrated our anniversary alone, our birthdays alone, and 3 Christmases alone, always setting an extra plate at the table just in case. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was Christmas Eve again, and our daughter Sarah was coming from Seattle with her husband Mark and their 2 children for our first real family Christmas since Gregory disappeared. I'd decorated the house with our old ornaments, including the angel Gregory had bought me on our first Christmas as newlyweds, a $200 splurge that seemed enormous back then, but now felt priceless. The doorbell rang at exactly 9:47 p.m. I remember the time because I'd been checking the clock obsessively, worried about Sarah driving in the snow. When I opened that door, expecting to see my daughter's familiar smile, my knees nearly buckled, standing in my porch light, looking like something dragged up from the depths of hell itself, was Gregory. My Gregory. But this wasn't the man who'd kissed me goodbye 5 years ago. His hair, once salt and pepper neat, hung in greasy strands past his shoulders. His face was gaunt, haunted, with eyes that darted frantically over my shoulder as if demons were chasing him. His clothes, God, his clothes were little more than rags hanging on a frame that had lost at least 40 pounds. But it was unmistakably him. The scar on his left eyebrow from when he fell off his bike at age 7. The crooked smile that had made me fall in love with him 43 years ago. "Hide us! They're after us!" he screamed, his voice cracking with terror I'd never heard before. Behind him stood a young woman, maybe 29, with stringy blonde hair and a pregnant belly that looked ready to burst. She was clutching 2 small children, a boy who couldn't have been more than 3, and a girl maybe 5 years old. Both children were crying, their faces dirty and their clothes tattered. The woman's eyes were wild with the same terror I saw in Gregory's face. "Please, Martha," Gregory begged, and hearing my name from his lips after 5 years of silence nearly stopped my heart. "Please, they'll kill us if they find us here." Without thinking, without questioning, without considering what this moment would cost me, I stepped aside and let them in. I locked the door, turned off the porch light, and in that instant, my carefully reconstructed life crumbled like a house of cards in an earthquake. Minutes later, as I stood in my living room staring at my husband, my supposedly dead husband, holding another woman's children while she rubbed her pregnant belly, the worst was yet to come. If this story has already gripped you the way it gripped my very soul that night, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. I need to know I'm not alone in this journey. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there, because time, as you'll discover, becomes meaningless when your world turns upside down in a single moment. The silence in my living room was deafening. Gregory stood there swaying slightly on his feet, while this pregnant stranger and 2 terrified children huddled behind him like he was their shield against some invisible army. The Christmas tree lights blinked cheerfully in the corner, mocking the nightmare that had just walked through my door. "Gregory," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Where have you been?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Shame so deep it seemed to consume him from the inside out. "Martha, God, Martha, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." The pregnant woman stepped forward, one protective hand on her belly, the other pulling the two children closer to her. "Are you his wife?" she asked, her voice thick with an accent I couldn't place. "Eastern European, maybe Russian. He told me about you, said you were the kindest woman he'd ever known." I stared at her swollen belly, doing the math in my head. If she was as far along as she looked, this baby had been conceived at least 6 months after Gregory disappeared. "Who are you?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "My name is Lena Volkov," she said, lifting her chin with a dignity that seemed impossible given her circumstances. "These are my children, Dmitri and Anya." The little boy buried his face in her leg, while the girl, Anya, stared at me with eyes that were startlingly blue and far too old for her young face. "Gregory," I said, turning back to my husband, "I need you to explain, right now, what happened to you? Where have you been? And why are you here with—" I gestured helplessly at Lena and the children. Gregory sank into our old recliner, the same one where he used to read the Sunday paper, and buried his face in his hands. "It started with a phone call," he said, his voice muffled. "Remember how I'd been getting those strange calls for weeks before I disappeared? Hang-ups, foreign voices asking for someone named Kozlov?" I did remember. We'd thought they were wrong numbers or maybe scammers. "What does that have to do with anything?" "My father," Gregory said, looking up at me with tears streaming down his cheeks. "You know I was adopted, Martha. You know I never knew my real family. But what I didn't know was that my birth father was Viktor Kozlov, and Viktor Kozlov owed some very dangerous people a lot of money." The room seemed to tilt around me. "That's impossible. Your father's name was Robert Kennedy. We have the adoption papers." "Forged," Lena said quietly. "Your husband's father was my husband. Was. They killed Victor 3 months after Gregory disappeared, tortured him first to find out where his American son was living. I felt like I was drowning in information that made no sense." "Your husband?" "Viktor Volkov was my married name," Lena explained. "But Viktor's real name was Kozlov. He had many identities, many names. The Russian mob doesn't care much for paperwork accuracy, Mrs. Kennedy. They just care about collecting debts." Gregory's voice was hollow as he continued. "When I went to buy wine that night, they were waiting by my car. 3 men in black suits who knew things about my adoption that I'd never told anyone, not even you, Martha. They said Victor owed their boss $500,000, and since Victor was dead, the debt passed to his son, to me." "That's insane," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I remembered Gregory's strange behavior in the weeks before he vanished, the way he'd been checking the locks obsessively, how he'd suddenly insisted on walking me to my car after work, the way he'd startled every time the phone rang. "They gave me a choice," Gregory continued. "Come with them willingly and work off the debt, or they'd kill you, Martha. They knew where you worked, what time you left the library, what route you took home. They showed me pictures of you taken from inside our house, pictures of you sleeping." The words hit me like physical blows. "You left to protect me?" "I thought I could handle it. I thought I could work for them for a few months, maybe a year, and then come home. I never imagined." He gestured at Lena and the children. Lena shifted uncomfortably, wincing as the baby kicked. "Victor was already married to me when they killed him. I was pregnant with his child, Gregory's half-brother or sister. When they realized Victor was dead, they decided Gregory needed to take over Victor's family responsibilities as well as his debts." "They forced you to marry my husband?" I asked, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "Not exactly married," Lena said, her cheeks flushing. "But in their world, a woman with children needs a protector. Gregory became our protector. The marriage was practical." I looked at Gregory, my husband of 38 years, and saw a stranger. "How much of the debt did you work off?" "I managed to earn back $380,000 over 5 years, he said. "I worked on their ships, moving cargo I didn't ask questions about, taking risks that should have killed me a dozen times over. But every time I got close to freedom, they found new reasons to add to the debt. Interest, penalties, fees for protecting Lena and the children. And the baby she's carrying? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Gregory's silence told me everything I needed to know. 3 months ago, Lena said softly, we discovered that Gregory's handler, a man named Dmitry Petrov, was skimming money from Gregory's earnings and reporting it as additional debt. When Gregory confronted him, Petrov threatened to kill all of us and come after you, Mrs. Kennedy. So we ran. And now they've found you, I said, understanding beginning to dawn on me. There may be an hour behind us, Gregory said. Lena went into labor pains 20 miles back, and we had to stop. They caught up enough to see which direction we headed. As if summoned by his words, car headlights swept across my living room window, and the sound of multiple car doors slamming echoed through the night air. The headlights went dark, but I could see shadows moving around my house, like predators circling their prey. Lena's breathing became sharp and rapid, and little Dmitry began to whimper. Anya, with that unnatural composure that broke my heart, simply pressed herself against the wall and closed her eyes. How many? Gregory whispered, moving to peek through the curtains. 3 cars, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. At least 6 men that I can see. Gregory's face went pale. That's more than usual. They must be desperate to end this. The house phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the tension like a knife. We all froze. It rang again and again. Answer it, Gregory said. Act normal. You don't know anything. My hand shook as I picked up the receiver. Hello? Mrs. Kennedy. The voice was accented, polite, terrifying in its calm politeness. My name is Dmitry Petrov. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I'm sorry, but I don't know what you're talking about, I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. Your husband, Mrs. Kennedy, Gregory Kennedy, also known as Grigory Kozlov. He is a thief, and thieves must be punished. The children were watching me with those 2 old eyes, and Lena was gripping Gregory's arm so tightly her knuckles were white. My husband has been missing for 5 years, I said. The police know nothing, Petrov interrupted, but I know everything. I know that right now, Gregory is standing next to you. I know that the pregnant whore Lena is there with Victor's bastard children. I know that you have exactly 5 minutes to send them out, or we come in and take them. The line went dead. 5 minutes, I said to the room. Gregory was already moving, checking the back door, testing the locks on the windows. The basement, he said. Take them to the basement, Martha. There's a crawl space behind the water heater where we used to hide Christmas presents. Lena and the children can fit. What about you? I demanded. I'm done running, Gregory said, and for the first time since he'd appeared on my doorstep, he sounded like the man I'd married. I won't let them hurt you, Martha. Not after everything you've already lost because of me. Lena struggled to her feet, one hand pressed to her lower back. Gregory, no. If you go out there, they will kill you slowly. You know what Petrov does to people who steal from him. And if I don't go out there, they'll kill Martha, Gregory replied. I've already destroyed one family. I won't destroy another. That's when I did something that surprised even me. I walked to the hall closet and retrieved the shotgun Gregory had bought me for home protection after a series of break-ins in our neighborhood 2 years ago. I'd never fired it, but I'd taken a safety course at the local gun range after he disappeared. Nobody is going out there to die, I said, checking to make sure it was loaded. This is my house, and I decide who's welcome and who isn't. Gregory stared at me. Martha, these aren't neighborhood thugs. These are professional killers. And I'm a 62-year-old librarian who's spent 5 years thinking her husband was dead. I shot back. Do you think I have anything left to lose? Before anyone could answer, there was a thunderous pounding on the front door. Kennedy, you have 2 minutes. Basement. Now, I ordered, pointing toward the stairs. Lena, can you make it down the stairs? She nodded, though I could see she was in considerable pain. Gregory helped her while I scooped up little Dmitry. Anya followed silently, her small hand clutching the back of my cardigan. The basement was cold and musty, filled with 38 years of accumulated memories, Christmas decorations, photo albums, Gregory's old fishing gear. I showed them the crawl space behind the water heater, a cramped area barely big enough for one adult, let alone a pregnant woman and 2 children. Mrs. Kennedy, Lena said, grabbing my arm with surprising strength, there's something you need to know. In Gregory's jacket pocket, there's a flash drive, bank account numbers, transaction records, names and addresses of everyone in Petrov's organization. If something happens to us, take it to the FBI. It's evidence of money laundering, human trafficking, murder. It's worth millions of dollars to the right people. Nothing is going to happen, I said, but I was already reaching into Gregory's jacket. The flash drive was small, no bigger than my thumb, but it felt heavy as a brick in my hand. Martha, Gregory said, his voice thick with emotion. I love you. I've loved you every single day for 5 years. Everything I did to keep you safe. Save the goodbyes, I said briskly, though my heart was breaking. We're all getting through this. Another thunderous pounding, this time on the back door as well. They were surrounding the house. 30 seconds, Kennedy. I helped Lena squeeze into the crawl space, then passed the children to her. Dmitri was crying now, but silently, which was somehow more heartbreaking than sobbing would have been. Anya kissed my cheek before disappearing into the darkness. Gregory, I said, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to have faith that the woman you married isn't as helpless as she looks. And with that, I climbed the basement stairs, shotgun in hand, to face the most dangerous men in the Pacific Northwest. The pounding had stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own heartbeat and the distant sound of Lena's labored breathing from the basement. I positioned myself in the hallway where I could see both the front and back doors, and I waited. When they came through my doors, and they would come through my doors, they would find out that Martha Kennedy was not the same woman who had baked apple pies and shelved library books. 5 years of grief had forged something harder in me, something that even I didn't fully understand until this moment. The flash drive felt warm in my pocket, and suddenly I realized that this night wouldn't just be about survival. It would be about justice. They came through both doors simultaneously at exactly 10:15 p.m. I know, because the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed just as the front door exploded inward. 6 men in dark clothing moved through my house like they owned it, and the casual way they violated my home made something cold and dangerous settle in my chest. Mrs. Kennedy, Petrov's voice drifted from the living room. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that cost more than I made in 3 months. There is no need for dramatics. We simply want what belongs to us. I stepped into view, shotgun raised. Nothing in this house belongs to you. 2 of his men immediately drew guns, but Petrov held up a hand. Now, Mrs. Kennedy, surely we can discuss this like civilized people. Civilized people don't break down doors on Christmas Eve, I replied, keeping the shotgun trained on his chest. Petrov smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen. Your husband owes me $120,000, plus interest and penalties for his recent vacation. The total debt is now $200,000. We are prepared to be reasonable. Reasonable how? Gregory comes with us. The woman and children stay here with you. You never see any of us again. Everyone lives happily ever after. From the basement, I heard a soft thump, Lena shifting position, probably trying to get comfortable in that cramped space. One of Petrov's men tilted his head toward the sound. Counteroffer, I said, taking a step closer to Petrov. You leave my house right now, and I don't call the FBI about the flash drive in my pocket containing 5 years of your financial records. The change in Petrov's expression was immediate and terrifying. What flash drive? Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. Names of your associates in Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver. Transaction records showing payments to dock workers, customs officials, and at least 3 Seattle police detectives. Should I continue? Petrov's hand moved toward his jacket, but I shifted the shotgun's aim to his head. I wouldn't. You are bluffing. Gregory spent 5 years documenting everything. Insurance policy, he called it. Every transaction, every name, every detail of your organization is on this drive. I've already emailed copies to 3 different people with instructions to send it to the FBI if I don't check in by midnight. That was a complete lie, but Petrov didn't need to know that. Even if this is true, Petrov said, you would be implicating your husband in serious crimes. My husband has been a victim of your organization for 5 years. He was coerced, threatened, forced into labor under threat of death. Any prosecutor would see that. One of Petrov's men whispered something in Russian. Petrov's eyes narrowed. You have 15 minutes to produce Gregory and the drive, or we start making this very unpleasant for everyone. No, I said simply. No? No. You're going to leave my house right now. You're going to stop pursuing my husband and that woman and those children, and you're going to disappear from our lives permanently. Petrov laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Or what? You will shoot me? You will shoot all of us? You are one old woman with one gun. You're right, I said, and I saw confusion flicker across his face. I am one old woman with one gun, but I'm also one old woman with nothing left to lose and a very good understanding of how much damage a 12-gauge shotgun can do at close range. The truth was, I was terrified. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the gun steady. But something had crystallized in my mind during those tense moments. These men had stolen 5 years of my life. They had turned my husband into a stranger, terrorized a pregnant woman and 2 innocent children, and now they were standing in my living room, acting like they owned everything I held dear. You know what I realized tonight? I continued, my voice getting stronger. For 5 years, I mourned a man I thought was dead. I learned how to be alone, how to be strong, how to survive without the person I loved most in this world. Do you know what that does to someone, Mr. Petrov? It burns away everything soft and leaves behind something much harder. From the basement came another sound, Lena's sharp intake of breath. She was going into labor, real labor this time. Your friend downstairs is having a baby, I said to Petrov, right now, in my basement. And you want to know what's going to happen? I'm going to help her deliver that baby safely. My husband is going to hold his new child. Those 2 scared children are going to have a safe place to sleep tonight, and you're going to leave. You cannot possibly believe. The shotgun blast was deafening in the confined space. I'd aimed high, taking out a chunk of the crown molding above Petrov's head, but the message was clear. The next shot won't miss, I said into the sudden silence. Get out of my house. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Petrov straightened his tie and smiled that terrible smile again. Very well, Mrs. Kennedy. But this is not over. We know where you live. We know where you work. We know your daughter Sarah lives in Seattle with her husband Mark, and their children Emma and Jake. Emma is 7, I believe. Such a pretty little girl. The threat to my grandchildren hit me like a physical blow, but it also ignited something fierce and protective in my chest. If you go anywhere near my family, I will hunt you down myself. Bold words from a librarian. I'm not just a librarian anymore, I said, and I realized it was true. I'm a woman who spent 5 years believing in ghosts and learning how to live with the dead. I've got nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. Do you really want to find out what that looks like? From the basement came a cry. Unmistakably, the sound of a woman in the final stages of labor. Petrov's men were looking nervous now, glancing between their boss and the woman with the shotgun who had just blown a hole in her own ceiling. This wasn't going according to their script. You have until midnight, Petrov said finally. Produce Gregory and the drive, or we return with more men and fewer options for negotiation. And you have until I count to 10 to get out of my house, or I start shooting kneecaps. I began to count. 1. They didn't wait for 2. The moment Petrov and his men disappeared into the night, I locked what was left of my doors and raced to the basement. Lena's labored breathing had turned into sharp cries of pain, and Gregory was kneeling beside the crawl space, holding her hand through the opening. How long has she been like this? I asked, dropping to my knees beside them. The contractions started getting serious about 10 minutes ago, Gregory said, his face pale with worry. Martha, I don't know anything about delivering babies. Well, it's a good thing I do, I said, surprising both of them. I was a volunteer EMT for 3 years before I started working at the library, helped deliver 6 babies in ambulances and emergency situations. I looked around the basement, trying to assess what we had to work with. We need to get her out of that crawl space. The baby won't wait for a better location. We helped Lena out into the main basement area. She was sweating despite the cold, and when the next contraction hit, her grip on my hand was strong enough to leave bruises. How far apart are the contractions? I asked. Maybe 2 minutes, she gasped. The baby is coming now, I can feel it. I sent Gregory upstairs to gather supplies, clean towels, blankets, scissors, rubbing alcohol, anything that might be useful. While he was gone, I helped Lena get as comfortable as possible on an old mattress we'd stored down there. Mrs. Kennedy, Lena said, grabbing my arm during a brief lull between contractions. If something happens to me, promise me you'll take care of Dmitri and Anya. They've been through so much already. Nothing is going to happen to you, I said firmly. I've delivered 6 babies, and all 6 mothers went home healthy with healthy children. But privately, I was worried. Lena looked exhausted, and I could see signs that this birth might be complicated. The basement was hardly a sterile environment, and if something went wrong, the nearest hospital was 20 minutes away, assuming Petrov's men weren't watching the roads. Gregory returned with an armload of supplies, just as another contraction hit. Lena's cry of pain was so intense that little Dmitri started crying too. Anya, that remarkable little girl, immediately began singing a soft lullaby in Russian to comfort her brother. "Gregory," I said, "I need you to check the windows upstairs. Make sure they're really gone." But even as I said it, I saw car headlights sweep across the basement window again. They were back, or they'd never really left. "They're watching the house," Gregory confirmed when he returned. "At least 2 cars positioned where they can see all the exits." Another contraction, this one longer and more intense. Lena's breathing was becoming irregular, and I could see the baby's head beginning to crown. "Okay, Lena," I said, positioning myself to catch the baby. "On the next contraction, I need you to push as hard as you can." The next few minutes were a blur of intensity. Lena pushed with everything she had while Gregory held her hand and whispered encouragement in what I assumed was Russian. Dmitri and Anya watched with wide eyes as their new sibling entered the world. At 11:23 p.m. on Christmas Eve, in the basement of a house under siege by the Russian mob, a baby girl was born. She came into the world crying lustily, which was exactly what I wanted to hear. Her lungs were clear, her color was good, and despite the circumstances, she appeared to be perfectly healthy. "You have a daughter," I told Lena, placing the baby on her chest after wrapping her in a clean towel. Lena began to cry, tears of exhaustion, relief, and joy all mixed together. "Natalia," she whispered. "Her name is Natalia." Gregory stared at his daughter, because regardless of the complicated circumstances, this was his daughter, with an expression of wonder and terror. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "She's also very loud," I said with a smile, "which is good for her lungs, but bad for our situation upstairs." As if summoned by my words, there was a sharp knock on what remained of my front door. Not the aggressive pounding from before, but something more controlled, more ominous. "Mrs. Kennedy," Petrov's voice carried easily through the house. "I trust you can hear that beautiful sound. A new baby's cry is such a joy, is it not? But babies are so fragile, so vulnerable. It would be terrible if something were to happen to such an innocent child." The threat was clear, and it made my blood run cold, but it also crystallized something in my mind. These men weren't just criminals, they were monsters who would threaten a newborn baby to get what they wanted. I looked at Gregory, who was staring at his daughter with tears streaming down his face. "Martha," he said quietly, "I have to go with them. I can't let them hurt the children." "No," Lena said fiercely, struggling to sit up despite having given birth minutes earlier. "Gregory, no. The moment you go with them, they will kill all of us, including the baby. There will be no witnesses to what happened here tonight." She was right, and we all knew it. This wasn't going to end with Gregory surrendering himself. This was going to end with all of us dead, unless we found another way out. "The flash drive," I said suddenly. "What exactly is on it?" "Everything," Gregory said. 5 years of detailed records, bank accounts, shipping manifests, photographs of meetings, recordings of conversations, enough evidence to bring down not just Petrov's operation, but the entire Pacific Northwest network. How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimate? $50 million in assets, maybe more, plus the value of shutting down their trafficking operations. I thought about that number, $50 million. Compared to the $200,000 Gregory supposedly owed, it was nothing. But compared to what it could buy in terms of protection, witness relocation, and a new life for all of us, it was everything. "Mrs. Kennedy," Petrov called again. "You have 5 minutes to bring me Gregory and the drive, or I start shooting out your windows. After that, I start shooting other things." Baby Natalia had stopped crying and was now sleeping peacefully against her mother's chest. Dmitri and Anya were huddled together, watching the adults with those 2 serious eyes. "I have an idea," I said, "but it's risky, and it means trusting people we don't know." "What kind of idea?" Gregory asked. "The kind that might get us all killed," I admitted, "but it might also get us all free." I climbed the basement stairs with my cell phone, leaving Gregory to watch over Lena and the children. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number I'd memorized years ago, but never thought I'd use. "FBI Seattle Field Office, Agent Morrison speaking. This is Martha Kennedy in Spokane. I have information about Russian organized crime activities in the Pacific Northwest, and I need immediate assistance. There was a pause. Ma'am, it's almost midnight on Christmas Eve. Unless this is an immediate emergency, there are 6 armed men outside my house threatening to kill me, my family, and a newborn baby, I said. I have a flash drive containing 5 years of detailed financial records, shipping manifests, and evidence of money laundering, human trafficking, and murder. Is that immediate enough for you? The agent's tone changed instantly. Ma'am, I'm going to transfer you to Agent Sarah Chen, our organized crime specialist. Can you stay on the line? I don't have much choice. While I waited for the transfer, I peered through the curtains. Petrov's men had positioned themselves strategically around my property. Professional, patient, deadly. Mrs. Kennedy, this is Agent Chen. I understand you have information about Russian organized crime. I quickly explained the situation. Gregory's disappearance and return, Lena and the children, Petrov's demands, and most importantly, the flash drive. You're telling me you have 5 years of financial records from a major trafficking operation? Agent Chen's voice was skeptical. Account numbers, transaction records, names of associates, photographs, audio recordings. My husband documented everything as insurance. Mrs. Kennedy, even if this is legitimate, we can't mobilize a response team based on a phone call. We'd need to verify. How about this for verification? I interrupted. I pulled up the files on the flash drive using Gregory's phone and read off 3 bank account numbers, followed by transaction details from the previous month. There was a long silence. Then Agent Chen said, Mrs. Kennedy, where did you get that information? From the flash drive I'm holding. Now, are you going to help us, or should I call the Seattle Times and see if they're interested in a story about how the FBI let a family be murdered on Christmas Eve while they had evidence to stop a $50 million criminal organization? Ma'am, please stay calm. I'm dispatching a team from our Spokane office right now. Can you hold out for 20 minutes? I'll have to. I hung up and returned to the basement. Lena was nursing baby Natalia, while Gregory kept watch at the small basement window. Dmitri and Anya had fallen asleep, curled up together under an old blanket. Who did you call? Gregory asked. The FBI. They're sending a team. Lena looked up from the baby. You trust the American government with our lives? I trust them more than I trust Petrov, I said. Besides, we're Americans now. Gregory's always been American. You and the children can become Americans, and baby Natalia was born on American soil. That makes this American business. Martha, Gregory said quietly, there's something else you need to know about the flash drive. I didn't like his tone. What? It's not just Petrov's operation. There are connections to other criminal organizations, corrupt officials in 3 states, and at least 1 federal judge who's been taking bribes. The implications hit me like a physical blow. How high up does this go? High enough that I'm not sure we can trust anyone in law enforcement, Gregory admitted. From upstairs came the sound of breaking glass. They were getting impatient. Mrs. Kennedy! Petrov's voice was closer now, probably inside the house. This is your final warning. The FBI team won't be here for another 15 minutes, I said. We need to buy more time. How? I thought about it for a moment, then smiled grimly. By giving Mr. Petrov what he wants. Martha, no, not the real flash drive, I clarified. I need you to create a duplicate. Put some of the real files on it, but not the most damaging ones. Make it look authentic, but incomplete. Gregory's eyes lit up with understanding. A bargaining chip. Exactly. We give him something that proves the drive is real, but we keep the evidence that could actually destroy his organization. While Gregory worked on creating the duplicate drive, I heard footsteps directly above us. They were inside the house now, searching room by room. There, Gregory said, handing me a second flash drive. This has about 20% of the real files, enough to convince him it's legitimate, but not enough to compromise the full investigation. Perfect. I tucked the real drive deeper into my pocket and held up the decoy. When they find us, we give them this and tell them it's everything. They take it and leave thinking they've solved their problem. And then? Then we wait for the FBI to arrest them based on the evidence from the real drive. Baby Natalia chose that moment to start crying again. A lusty, healthy cry that unfortunately told everyone in the house exactly where we were hiding. Heavy footsteps began descending the basement stairs. Places. Everyone, I whispered, positioning myself protectively in front of Lena and the children. Remember, This is the only copy we have, and it's all we're willing to trade. 3 men appeared at the bottom of the stairs, guns drawn. Behind them came Petrov, looking supremely confident. "How touching," he said, surveying the scene. "A Christmas nativity scene. Very seasonal." He gestured to one of his men, who immediately pointed his gun at baby Natalia. "The flash drive, Mrs. Kennedy. Now." I held up the decoy drive. "Everyone walks away alive, and I give you this. How do I know it contains what you claim? Because I'm about to show you something that will convince you." I pulled out Gregory's phone and accessed one of the files from the real drive. A photograph of Petrov meeting with a man I didn't recognize in what appeared to be a warehouse setting. This was taken 3 weeks ago. There are hundreds more like it. Petrov's confident expression flickered. "Give me the phone. Give me your word that you'll leave my family alone." "You are not in a position to negotiate, Mrs. Kennedy." That's when we heard the distant sound of sirens. Petrov's head snapped toward the basement window. "What did you do?" "I called for backup," I said simply. The sirens were getting closer. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. "Give me the drive and the phone, or I kill the baby right now," Petrov snarled. I looked at that gun, pointed at little Natalia, at Lena's terrified face, at Gregory's anguished expression, and I made a decision that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Okay," I said, holding out the decoy flash drive. "But you should know something else." "What?" "I lied about the FBI." I smiled grimly as the sirens reached my street. I didn't call the FBI. I called the Seattle Times, the Spokane Police, the State Police, and Channel 7 News. Every one of them should be pulling up outside my house right about now. Petrov's face went white as the sound of car doors slamming echoed from upstairs. The chaos that erupted in my basement was indescribable. Petrov was screaming orders in Russian while his men tried to figure out how to escape a house that was rapidly being surrounded. Baby Natalia was crying, Dmitri was sobbing, and Anya had gone completely silent in the way that terrified children do. But I was lying about calling the media, and we all realized it when Agent Chen's voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is the FBI. The house is surrounded. Come out with your hands visible." Petrov spun toward me, his face twisted with rage. "You called the FBI after all." "I called everyone," I said, which was partially true. "The question is, who got here first?" Through the basement window, I could see the flashing lights of multiple police vehicles. But more importantly, I could see the distinctive FBI windbreakers moving into position around the house. "There's no way out," I told Petrov. "Your best option is to surrender now and hope for a plea deal." One of Petrov's men was speaking rapidly in Russian, gesturing toward the basement window. Petrov listened, then looked back at our family huddled together on the basement floor. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we can still negotiate. Mr. Petrov!" Agent Chen's voice carried clearly through the house. "We know you're inside. We have the building surrounded. Come out now with your hands visible." Petrov smiled that terrible smile again. "It appears your FBI friends want to talk. Perhaps they would be interested in a trade." "What kind of trade?" "The flash drive and safe passage out of the country in exchange for your family's lives." I could see Gregory calculating distances, wondering if he could rush Petrov before the man could hurt anyone. But with 3 guns trained on us and a newborn baby in the line of fire, it was an impossible situation. "Mrs. Kennedy," Agent Chen called again. "If you can hear me, please respond." "Here," I shouted back. "We're in the basement. There are armed men down here with us." "How many?" "4, and they have hostages." There was a brief silence, then Agent Chen's voice again, but this time she was clearly speaking to her team rather than to us. "Hostage situation confirmed. Basement location. Proceed with caution." Petrov was looking increasingly desperate. The sirens outside had multiplied, and I could hear the distant thrum of a helicopter. Whatever response the FBI had mobilized, it was significant. "The drive," Petrov demanded, holding out his hand. "Give it to me now, and perhaps some of you live through this." I looked at the decoy drive in my palm. It contained enough real information to be valuable, but not enough to truly damage his organization. The real drive was still safely hidden in my pocket. "If I give you this," I said, "how do I know you won't kill us anyway?" "You don't, but if you don't give it to me, I guarantee I will kill all of you, starting with the baby." Lena made a small, desperate sound and held Natalia closer to her chest. Gregory's hands were clenched into fists, and I could see he was preparing to do something reckless. "Okay," I said, holding out the decoy drive. "But I want safe passage for my family in return." Petrov snatched the drive and immediately plugged it into his phone. His eyes scanned the screen, reading file names and checking data. For a moment, his expression was satisfied. "This appears to be genuine," he said. "But how do I know this is everything?" "Because that's 5 years of my husband's life on that drive," I said. "Every transaction, every operation, every detail he could safely record without getting caught. It's everything." From upstairs came the sound of the FBI team entering the house. Heavy footsteps, shouted commands, the systematic clearing of rooms. "Basement secure," someone called. "Moving to clear the upper levels." Petrov's men were getting nervous, glancing between their boss and the ceiling as the FBI team moved through the house above us. "There has to be another way out," one of them said in English. "There is," I said, surprising everyone. "The basement has an old coal chute that leads to the side yard. It hasn't been used in 20 years, but it's still accessible." I was lying, but I needed to buy time for the FBI to get into position. Petrov's eyes narrowed. "Show us." "It's behind the furnace," I said, gesturing toward the far corner of the basement. "But it's a tight fit. You'd have to leave the hostages behind." "Or we could take one," Petrov said thoughtfully. "Insurance for safe passage." He looked directly at baby Natalia, and my heart stopped. "Take me instead," I said immediately. "I know the neighborhood. I know which routes the police are likely to block. I'm more valuable as a guide than a baby is as a hostage." Gregory started to protest, but I cut him off with a look. The truth was, I had the real flash drive in my pocket. If Petrov took me, I could find a way to get it to the FBI. If he took the baby, everyone lost. "Interesting proposition," Petrov said. "But why would you volunteer?" "Because I'm a 62-year-old woman who's already lived most of her life," I said. "And because that baby deserves a chance to grow up." Petrov studied me for a long moment. "Very well. But if you try to escape or signal the police, I will come back here and kill everyone. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Basement." Agent Chen's voice was much closer now. "FBI, we're coming down." "Move!" Petrov barked to his men. 2 of them grabbed me, while the 3rd kept his gun trained on Gregory and Lena. We moved toward the back corner of the basement, where I continued my lie about the coal chute. "There," I said, pointing to a wall that clearly had no opening. "Behind those boxes." As Petrov's men moved to investigate, I caught Gregory's eye and touched my pocket briefly. His eyes widened slightly as he understood. I still had the real drive. "There's nothing here," one of the men hissed. "Keep looking," I said. "It's hidden." That bought us another 30 seconds before the FBI team reached the top of the basement stairs. "FBI, basement is secured. Come out with your hands visible." Petrov pressed his gun against my neck. "Tell them we're coming up with a hostage." "Agent Chen," I called. "They're bringing me upstairs. Don't shoot." As we started up the basement stairs, I managed to slip the real flash drive out of my pocket and drop it behind a box of Christmas decorations. If I didn't survive this, at least the evidence would. But as we reached the main floor of the house, I realized that surviving was looking increasingly unlikely. The FBI had surrounded the building, but Petrov still had me at gunpoint, and desperate men make desperate choices. The next few minutes would determine whether my family lived to see Christmas morning. The main floor of my house looked like a war zone. The FBI had set up tactical positions throughout the living room and kitchen, with agents positioned behind overturned furniture and doorways. Agent Chen stood in the center of the room, her weapon drawn but pointed at the floor, her eyes locked on Petrov as we emerged from the basement. "Let her go, Petrov," Agent Chen said calmly. "We know who you are, we know what you've done, and we know you're trapped. Make this easy on everyone." Petrov's arm was tight around my neck, his gun pressed against my temple. I could feel him trembling slightly. Whether from adrenaline or fear, I couldn't tell. "I want safe passage to the airport and a plane to Moscow," he said. "In exchange, the old woman lives." "You know we can't do that," Agent Chen replied, "but we can guarantee your safety if you surrender now." "My safety?" Petrov laughed bitterly. "Do you know what happens to people who fail my employers? Surrendering to you would be signing my death warrant." Behind Agent Chen, I could see at least 6 other FBI agents positioned throughout the house. Through the windows, flashing lights from police cars and ambulances painted the walls in alternating red and blue. The helicopter I'd heard earlier was circling overhead, its spotlight occasionally sweeping across the windows. "What about your men downstairs?" Agent Chen asked. "Are you going to abandon them?" "My men understand the risks of this business," Petrov said. "They know the price of failure." As if summoned by his words, there was a commotion from the basement, shouts, the sound of a struggle, and then Gregory's voice calling up the stairs. "Martha, the baby's not breathing right." Terror shot through me like electricity. Natalia had seemed fine when we'd left the basement, but newborns could deteriorate quickly, especially in stressful situations. "I need to go to her," I said to Petrov. "You're not going anywhere," he replied, but I could hear uncertainty in his voice. "That's your daughter down there," I said. "Your flesh and blood. If she dies because you kept me from helping her, how are you going to live with that?" For a moment, something human flickered across Petrov's face. Then the cold mask returned. One child more or less makes no difference. But Agent Chen had heard the exchange, and her expression sharpened. "Mr. Petrov, there's a newborn baby in medical distress downstairs. Whether you care about her or not, that changes the situation. We need to get medical personnel down there immediately." "No one goes downstairs," Petrov said firmly. "Then bring the baby up here," Agent Chen suggested. "Let the paramedics treat her while we continue our discussion." From the basement came the sound of baby Natalia crying, but it was a weak, distressed cry that made my maternal instincts scream. Whether she was genuinely in medical trouble or Gregory was creating a diversion, I couldn't tell, but something needed to happen soon. "Mr. Petrov," I said quietly, "I spent 5 years thinking my husband was dead. 5 years believing I'd lost the most important person in my life. When he showed up tonight with Lena and those children, I realized that sometimes we get second chances we don't expect. That baby is your second chance." "You think I care about some bastard child?" he snarled. "I think you care about not being the kind of man who lets innocent children die," I said. "I think somewhere underneath all this violence and criminality, you're still human." Agent Chen was watching this exchange carefully, and I could see her calculating angles, trying to figure out how to resolve this without anyone getting killed. "Here's what we're going to do," she said. "Mrs. Kennedy, you're going to walk down those stairs and help that baby. Mr. Petrov, you're going to stay up here with me, and we're going to work out a solution that doesn't end with anyone dying." "No," Petrov said immediately. "She stays with me." "Then we all go downstairs together," Agent Chen suggested. "You keep your weapon on Mrs. Kennedy, I keep mine holstered, and we make sure that baby gets the medical attention she needs. After that, we can discuss your options." From the basement, Gregory's voice called up again. "Martha, please, I don't know what to do." The desperation in his voice was real, and it decided me. "I'm going down there," I told Petrov. "Shoot me if you want, but I'm not letting a baby die because of your pride." I started toward the basement stairs, fully expecting to feel a bullet between my shoulder blades. Instead, I heard Petrov curse in Russian, then his footsteps following behind me. Agent Chen and 2 of her men followed us down the stairs, weapons drawn but not aimed. The scene in the basement broke my heart. Lena was sitting against the wall, holding Natalia, who was indeed crying weakly. The baby's color was slightly blue around her lips, suggesting breathing difficulties. Dmitri and Anya were pressed against their mother's side, watching their new sister with terrified eyes. Gregory was kneeling beside them, helpless. 2 of Petrov's men were still in the basement, their weapons trained on the family, but they looked uncertain about what was happening upstairs. I immediately knelt beside Lena and examined the baby. Natalia's breathing was shallow and rapid, and she felt slightly cool to the touch. It could have been the stress of the birth, the cold basement, or something more serious. "She needs to get to a hospital," I said. "Now." "The paramedics are outside," Agent Chen said. "We can have her in an ambulance in 2 minutes." Petrov was staring at the baby with an unreadable expression. For a moment, the tough criminal facade cracked, and I saw something vulnerable underneath. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. "She's your daughter," Lena said, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. "Whatever else happens tonight, she's your child. Don't let her die because of your pride." The basement was silent except for the baby's labored breathing and the distant sounds of law enforcement activity outside. Then Petrov did something that surprised everyone. He lowered his gun. "Get the paramedics," Petrov said quietly, his weapon now pointing at the floor. Agent Chen immediately spoke into her radio, and within seconds we could hear heavy footsteps pounding down the basement stairs. 2 paramedics appeared with a full medical kit and a portable incubator. "What do we have?" the lead paramedic asked, immediately kneeling beside Lena and the baby. "Newborn, approximately 2 hours old," I said. "Born in less than ideal circumstances. Breathing difficulties, slight cyanosis around the lips." The paramedics worked quickly and efficiently, checking Natalia's vital signs and oxygen levels. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately," one of them said. "Possible respiratory distress syndrome. Could be serious." "Go," Petrov said to Lena. "Take the children and go with them." Lena stared at him in shock. "What about you?" "I'll figure something out." As the paramedics prepared to transport Natalia, Agent Chen looked at Petrov. "This doesn't have to end badly for you. We can work out a deal." "What kind of deal?" Petrov asked, but his attention was focused on watching his daughter being prepared for transport. "You surrender peacefully, you cooperate with our investigation, and we'll make sure you get to see your daughter grow up. Eventually. In prison. Better than dead," Agent Chen pointed out. Gregory had been quiet during this exchange, but now he stood up and faced Petrov directly. "You know what the difference is between you and me?" he said. "For 5 years, I did whatever you asked because I thought I was protecting my family. I committed crimes. I hurt people. I became someone I didn't recognize. But tonight, when it really mattered, I chose to protect innocent children instead of protecting myself." "Your point?" Petrov asked. "My point is that you have the same choice right now. You can keep fighting and probably die in this basement, leaving your daughter an orphan. Or you can surrender and maybe, someday, get to be a father to her." Petrov was silent for a long moment, watching as the paramedics lifted little Natalia into the portable incubator. Her tiny face was peaceful now, but she was still struggling to breathe. "There's something else you should know," Agent Chen said. "The flash drive Mrs. Kennedy gave you? It's not complete. We know there's more evidence out there, and we're going to find it whether you cooperate or not. But if you help us, if you provide information about the larger organization, we can offer you witness protection after you serve your time." Petrov's head snapped toward me. "Incomplete?" I nodded. "I kept the most damaging files as insurance. But if you let my family go safely, if you surrender peacefully, I'll turn over everything to the FBI. You lied to me. I protected my family," I said. "Just like you're trying to protect yours." The paramedics were ready to move Natalia upstairs. Lena struggled to her feet, still weak from giving birth, while Dmitri and Anya clung to her sides. "Mr. Petrov," Agent Chen said, "I need a decision. Are you coming upstairs peacefully, or do we have to do this the hard way?" Petrov looked around the basement, at his 2 remaining men who were watching him uncertainly, at Gregory, who had suffered 5 years of servitude because of choices Petrov had made, at Lena and the children, who represented both his crimes and his chance at redemption, and at me, the librarian who had somehow outmaneuvered him through sheer determination to protect her family. "If I surrender," he said slowly, "what happens to my men?" "They'll be arrested and charged based on their individual involvement," Agent Chen said. "But if they cooperate, if they provide information about the organization, they'll get better deals than if they fight." Petrov spoke rapidly in Russian to his 2 men. They looked surprised, then resigned, and finally nodded. "We surrender," Petrov said, setting his weapon on the basement floor and raising his hands. "But I want to see my daughter safely in the ambulance before you put the handcuffs on." "Agreed." As we moved upstairs, I caught Gregory's arm. "The real flash drive," I whispered. "I dropped it behind the Christmas decorations. Make sure Agent Chen gets it." Gregory nodded, then surprised me by pulling me into a fierce hug. "Martha," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm so sorry. For everything. For leaving you. For bringing this danger into your life. For—" "Stop," I said firmly. "You did what you had to do to protect me. Now we're all going to be okay." Outside, the scene was like something from a movie. Police cars, FBI vehicles, ambulances, and fire trucks lined the street. Neighbors stood in their bathrobes, despite the cold, watching as paramedics loaded baby Natalia into an ambulance. Lena climbed in beside her daughter, while Dmitri and Anya were guided into a second ambulance for evaluation. Petrov watched from the front door as his daughter was driven away to the hospital. For just a moment, with his hands cuffed behind his back and tears on his cheeks, he looked like what he really was, a father worried about his child. "She'll be okay," I told him as Agent Chen led him toward an FBI vehicle. "Babies are stronger than they look. He nodded once, then looked directly at me. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for helping her, for everything." As the FBI car pulled away, taking Petrov toward whatever justice awaited him, I realized that Christmas morning was breaking over Spokane. The first hint of dawn was showing in the eastern sky, and somehow, against all odds, we had all survived the night. But our story was far from over. 6 months later, I stood in the visiting room of the federal prison in Seattle, watching Dmitry Petrov hold his daughter for the first time since the night she was born. Natalia was healthy and beautiful, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's delicate features. She gurgled happily as he spoke to her in soft Russian, tears streaming down his face. "She knows you," I told him. "Lena brings her here every week." Petrov looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, genuine gratitude mixed with deep regret. "Mrs. Kennedy, I can never apologize enough for what I put your family through." "You don't need to keep apologizing," I said. "You made your choice that night, the right choice." The federal investigation that followed had been massive. The evidence from Gregory's flash drive had led to the arrest of 43 people across 3 states, the seizure of $67 million in assets, and the dismantling of one of the largest human trafficking operations on the West Coast. Gregory had testified before a federal grand jury, and his cooperation had earned him immunity from prosecution. Petrov, as promised, had received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation. He would serve 8 years in federal prison, followed by supervised release, but he would live to see his daughter grow up, and that had made all the difference to him. Lena had been granted asylum and was working toward her citizenship. She'd found a job at a Russian cultural center in Seattle, translating documents and helping other refugees navigate the immigration system. Dmitry and Anya were thriving in school, their English improving rapidly, their nightmares becoming less frequent, and Gregory was slowly becoming himself again. The haunted look in his eyes was fading, replaced by something I'd thought I'd lost forever: hope. We'd started couples counseling to work through the trauma of our separation and everything that had followed. Some days were harder than others, but we were rebuilding our marriage, one conversation at a time. "Mrs. Kennedy," Petrov said, "there's something I want you to know. The night we came to your house, when you stood up to me with that shotgun, you reminded me of someone." "Who?" "My grandmother. She was a small woman like you, but fierce when it came to protecting her family. She died defending her grandchildren from soldiers during the war. I hadn't thought about her in years, but when you pointed that gun at me and told me to get out of your house," he shook his head. "You reminded me that there are things more important than money or power or fear." As our visiting time came to an end, Petrov kissed his daughter's forehead and handed her back to Lena. "Take care of her," he said, "both of them, and tell Dmitry and Anya that their papa is going to be a better man when he comes home." "I will," Lena promised. Outside the prison, as we walked to our cars, Lena turned to me with a question she'd been asking for months. "Mrs. Kennedy, why did you help us? You could have turned Gregory away that night. You could have let Petrov take us and been safe." I thought about that question, the same one I'd been asking myself since Christmas Eve. "Do you know what I realized during those 5 years when I thought Gregory was dead?" I said. "I realized that the worst thing isn't losing the people you love. The worst thing is failing to protect them when you have the chance." "But we were strangers to you." "No," I said, smiling as I watched Gregory playing peekaboo with baby Natalia. "You were family. The moment you walked through my door with children who needed protection, you became my family." 3 weeks later, we received word that Dmitry and Anya's adoption had been finalized. Legally, they were now Gregory's children and my grandchildren. We celebrated with a party at our rebuilt house, the same house where our nightmare had begun, now transformed into a symbol of hope and new beginnings. As I watched Gregory teaching Dmitry how to ride a bike, while Anya helped me plant flowers in the garden, I thought about how much had changed since that snowy Christmas Eve. We'd gone from being a quiet retired couple to being a family of 6, spanning 3 generations and 2 continents. The FBI had returned $3 million to families victimized by Petrov's organization. Gregory had received a reward of $150,000 for his cooperation, which we'd put into trust funds for the children's education. But more importantly, we'd all learned something about the power of choosing love over fear, protection over self-preservation. My daughter Sarah and her family had driven up from Seattle for the adoption celebration, and as we sat around the dinner table that night, Sarah raised her glass in a toast. "To Mom," she said, "who taught us that librarians are apparently much tougher than anyone realizes." Everyone laughed, but Gregory caught my eye across the table and smiled the smile that had made me fall in love with him 44 years ago. "To Martha," he said, "who saved us all." As I looked around that table at our complicated, beautiful, hard-won family, I realized that sometimes the most important stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with, and they continued to love each other through whatever came next, which is exactly what we did. If this story has touched your heart the way it changed mine, please subscribe to this channel for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of family, courage, and second chances. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there, because no matter where you are in the world, we're all connected by the stories that remind us what it means to be human. Thank you for joining me on this journey.